Blake Shelton has spent 20 years building a reputation for saying exactly what he means while the world scrambles to catch up, and the most recent example may be the most revealing one yet. Country music's most reliably candid voice handed everyone something they weren't entirely ready for during a May 2025 television appearance, and the fallout that followed was loud, funny, and oddly emotional all at once. What separates this moment from the usual celebrity soundbite isn't the shock factor, though the studio audience made abundantly clear there was plenty of that, but the way it pulled back a curtain on a friendship that fans had been watching develop for over a decade without ever quite finding the right language for it. He sat across from Kelly Clarkson on her own daytime television stage, looked directly into the camera, and delivered a line so blunt and so perfectly timed that the room went completely silent before it erupted into chaos. No talking points, no PR filter anywhere in sight, and no carefully rehearsed spin waiting in the wings. Just Blake being Blake, and in doing so, accidentally confirming what millions of people had quietly believed for years about a bond that had always been hiding in plain sight. The show had barely warmed up when Kelly, working the crowd in an electric blue suit, like she owned every square inch of that set, landed the first jab. Blake had recently released a song called Texas, and she wasted no time reminding him and everyone watching that he was born and raised in Ada, Oklahoma, which is about as far from Texas as Oklahoma gets geographically or culturally. The audience laughed, and Blake tilted his head, let the noise settle, then leaned forward with that slow and mischievous half grin and said, "Kelly and I are so inbred we probably share a toothbrush." Dead silence hit the room for a full 2 seconds before the place came apart completely. Kelly clutched at the air, doubled over, tears rolling, unable to form any coherent response. Blake kept building. "I'm serious. Same managers, same songwriters, same ex-in-laws." He winked, daring the room to keep pace. The segment hadn't even ended before clips were flooding social media, and within 1 hour, the view count had cleared 1 million. His publicist, reportedly stationed somewhere backstage managing a complicated mixture of professional horror and reluctant admiration, responded to the entire situation by posting a single cowboy hat emoji with no caption attached. No clarification, no denial. Just the hat, sitting there like a period at the end of a sentence nobody was going to challenge. Understanding why that line hit the way it did requires understanding what the Nashville country music world actually looks like from the inside. The industry operates like a small town that somehow produces global stars, where everyone's professional history overlaps with everyone else's in ways that take a proper flowchart to trace back to the beginning. Blake's longtime manager was Narvel Blackstock. Kelly's ex-husband was Brandon Blackstock, who is Narvel's son, which means the two of them were orbiting the same professional universe long before The Voice existed as a television show. The threads multiply considerably beyond that starting point. The music producer who shaped Blake's signature country sound probably worked recording sessions on Kelly's earliest demos when both of them were still unknown quantities in the industry. The songwriter responsible for one of Blake's #1 ballads very likely played the same dive bars alongside Kelly before either of them carried a record deal worth mentioning. Shared publicists, overlapping touring circuits, the same award show green rooms at every major country music event going back to a time when both of them were still figuring out who they were. Their mutual contacts would fill a considerable guest list, and that network tightened further with every year they remained active in the same world. That's the reality Blake described with one provocative word, and the joke landed the way it did because the underlying truth is genuinely impossible to argue with. Their actual first encounter happened in 2006, in a bar tucked just off Printer's Alley in Nashville, the kind of room with sticky floors and the permanent smell of old wood and cold beer that runs through that neighborhood's bones. Blake was already drawing recognition from the country hit Austin, which had established him as someone the industry needed to watch. Kelly, long before she became the polished daytime television host that audiences would later rely on for warmth and candid humor, was raw and aggressive on stage that night, fronting a rock band and turning Since You Been Gone into something that hit the crowd like a physical force, all grit and barely contained energy. After the set, Blake found her at the bar, threw out a few compliments and a few well-timed jokes, and they exchanged numbers. Nothing dramatic about the moment itself, but what grew from that casual exchange was a friendship built across the genuine grind of the music business, which is far more corrosive and unpredictable than most people on the outside ever fully appreciate, and which demands a kind of loyalty that goes well beyond shared career achievements. When Kelly married Brandon Blackstock, Blake attended the rehearsal dinner as a genuine friend rather than a professional obligation, roasting the groom in front of the room and keeping the energy loose in exactly the way only he manages. Years later, when that marriage ended in a publicly painful and drawn-out process, Blake was still present, sending late-night texts and ridiculous videos during the stretches when the tabloid headlines were at their most relentless. None of that ever made it into entertainment coverage, which is precisely why most people watching their on-screen chemistry on The Voice and during joint appearances never saw the full depth of what existed underneath all the teasing and theatrical eye rolls. The public storms Kelly has navigated over the years are worth understanding if you want to know why their bond carries the weight it does. In 2007, she fought her own record label and the legendary music executive Clive Davis just to release My December, a personal and rock-infused album she had written herself after the worldwide success of Breakaway turned her into a global name almost overnight. Davis reportedly pushed back hard, publicly criticizing the record and allegedly telling her that her role was to sing rather than write, and that creative decisions should be left to people with more experience making them. Kelly held her ground, released the album the way she envisioned it, and collected the difficult label that the music industry reliably assigns to women who refuse to be shaped into something easier for everyone else to manage. Blake stayed publicly quiet through the entire confrontation, but later admitted that watching her get dragged through the press for simply wanting to speak through her own music was something that genuinely bothered him in a way that stuck around. The 2018 controversy came through a single radio interview where Kelly mentioned how she was raised and said she saw nothing wrong with how she disciplines her children. Social media erupted almost instantly, parenting advocates weighed in from every corner, and the criticism kept building for days without showing any signs of slowing down. Blake's complete response to the entire situation was one private text message telling her she was a great mother. No press statement, no public defense, just a direct message that cut straight through the noise without adding a single word to it. Then 2023 brought a Rolling Stone report on working conditions at the Kelly Clarkson show, with staff describing stress and mental strain, though every person interviewed made a specific point of saying Kelly herself was wonderful and almost certainly unaware of what was happening around her in the building. Her name still got dragged through unflattering headlines for weeks regardless. And then, without any announcement or attribution, anonymous pizza trucks started arriving at the show on Fridays, funded by someone in Nashville who had absolutely no interest in being identified or thanked for it. The trucks kept coming week after week. That's Blake Shelton's version of a public statement, consistent, quiet, and completely unmistakable once you know what you're looking at. Social media's reaction to the toothbrush line was immediate and completely unhinged in the most entertaining way imaginable. Twitter generated comparisons to Chandler and Joey from the iconic American sitcom Friends, but as one particularly memorable post described it, in Wranglers and with considerably better vocals. An Instagram poll asking fans to classify the two as siblings or soulmates returned 73% in the siblings column, a result the internet treated as settled, official, and non-negotiable. TikTok built an entire ecosystem around the audio clip within hours, with stitches, reenactments, and POV videos about absurdly tangled professional relationships flooding the platform continuously and showing no signs of slowing down. One viral stitch opened with the on-screen text, POV. Your work wife is also your cousin's ex-neighbor's former boss, which somehow captured Blake's original joke more efficiently than any professional headline managed to. Kelly's mother, Jean, responded to a clip of the interview by dropping 3 crying, laughing emojis, and the internet accepted that immediately as full official endorsement of the entire dynamic. What the reaction revealed wasn't just amusement, it was recognition. The particular feeling fans experience when something they've quietly believed for years gets confirmed out loud by the last person who was expected to confirm it. Before the segment wrapped, Kelly looked at Blake and said directly that if they were this deeply connected, he needed to get on a record with her. Blake fired back immediately that he'd do it, but only if he got to yodel. The hashtag #YodelWithKelly was trending across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok before most viewers had finished watching the original clip a single time. And none of this was a new conversation for either of them. Back in 2012, Blake told Billboard magazine that he wanted to record with Kelly before they were both too old to remember the lyrics to anything. At 48 and 43 respectively in 2025, the fan campaign to make that happen carries a real urgency that simply didn't exist before that studio moment. Kelly's next album reportedly carries an open feature slot, and the online consensus, backed by thousands of posts, coordinated social media campaigns, and videos that keep accumulating across every major platform, is that the slot belongs to Blake and to nobody else. Fans aren't waiting politely for an official announcement at this point. They're actively campaigning, loudly and persistently, and the collective pressure has become genuinely difficult for anyone in either camp to ignore or dismiss. What the confession actually shifted is harder to quantify than a trending hashtag. But the change is real, and it runs deeper than most celebrity moments ever reach. For years, audiences watched Blake and Kelly's dynamic on The Voice and during shared public appearances without quite being able to categorize what they were seeing. It wasn't rivalry and wasn't standard celebrity friendship. It was something more specific and more lived in, the kind that only develops through years of shared experience that neither party felt compelled to explain to anyone watching from the outside. By calling it inbred, Blake gave the public a single word that carried all of that complexity without requiring any additional context to make sense of it. Every roast lands with different weight now. Every exaggerated eye roll reads differently for everyone watching it unfold. The friendship itself hasn't changed. What shifted is the framework available for understanding it, and that changes how every future moment between them will be received. A full tour isn't arriving anytime soon, and both of them would readily acknowledge that reality without much hesitation. Vegas residencies reportedly run booked solid through 2026, alongside recording commitments and family priorities that don't bend easily around the logistics of a major touring schedule. But smaller collaborations, the kind that generate enormous cultural attention without requiring a year of planning, become far more possible and far more anticipated after a public moment like this one. A CMT Crossroads special, a surprise single that drops without warning, a live-streamed duet performance that the internet spends a week dissecting from every possible angle. The audience exists and has already proven it'll show up. The chemistry is documented across years of television footage that fans have already memorized. And the decades of actual friendship behind it all give any future collaboration something manufactured celebrity pairings never managed to produce, a documented, genuine reason to care about what happens next. Blake Shelton didn't deliver a scandal that afternoon on Kelly's stage. He delivered a story without a script and without anything to fall back on, the way the best stories always tend to arrive.